Well, thank you very much. I won't need the mic. You hear me okay?
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark, for allowing me to speak here tonight and to spend some time with everybody here and I guess the Tecumseh West Gwillimbury Historic Society. I've heard about you. I've known Mark for a few years because I worked for the Farriers in Brown, I guess, for quite a few years. So I got to run into a lot of people, spend a lot of time in your cemetery. Ted Brown had a way of saying, let's go for a walk, and that's where we'd end up all the time. But I noticed he spent a lot of time in his area cleaning up a lot more. So on top of that, so I'm 58 years old. I started my policing back in 1987. I went to Georgian College prior to that. Prior to that, I did try to get hired by another police service, Peel Regional. When I tried, I made it past all the physicals and the testing. But what ended up happening is I got interviewed. I passed that stage. I got to the second interview. And I was only sitting down for 5 minutes when they said, I'm sorry, we're looking for taller guys. So, it was kind of hard to take back then, but that's how it was back then. Peel Region was known for their athletes, their hockey players, their large guys. So I wasn't hurt too bad. I was happy just to make it past the spelling. I grew up in a small town, Rescuel, Ontario. My dad had a farm and a logging farm on top of that. We raised cattle. So I spent a lot of time there and working at the Royal Winter Fair and the exhibition. I moved from there quickly. I got tired of farming. There's no money in it. And I went to Hamilton, did a couple of years as a concrete specialist and worked down there. And did 2 days at Tefasco, realized changing filters and light bulbs wasn't for me. And I got out of that quickly. I slowly decided that I was going to try policing again. So I came down to Barrie. I was lucky enough to get a spot at Georgian College. Back then it was called Law and Security. Law and Security, it was a pretty popular thing. Everybody wanted to be a fireman or a policeman or something like that. And I thought it was a good gig too. So I didn't know if I would make it. So at the same time I started apprenticing at home. I had to have something to fall back on. And I've never had a problem in the trades. So from the very start, ever since that time, I've been a general contractor doing jobs on the side, roofing, framing, and it right through into my retirement. Because it's true, when you retire, you have to have something to retire into. And a lot of people wait till they retire and spend 6 months trying to figure out what they're going to do. A lot of my buddies, their wives decide for them what they're going to do. So they now travel and spend money. When I got hired in Bradford, I was on a placement from Georgian College, and that was in '79. A lot of people might know Dennis Ruffin. Well, Dennis at that time was in charge of law and security. He oversaw it, and what Dennis did is he found me as a bit of an issue, a problem child, I guess. I had done work for Dennis, but he said, I got just the place for you. I had to do a placement on my final 2 years there, and he said, you're going to Bradford. Well, I'd never even heard of Bradford. I'd never even been through Bradford. So I came to Bradford and I worked with Andy Van Dyke. That's who they put me with. I don't know if that was punishment, but I learned to do chores in the morning at people's farms he was looking after. He made me buy all the coffees. And, he knew everybody in town. So I didn't do a lot of policing, I did a lot of social work. But during that time, there was a fight call that I went to on my second last day of my 2-week ride along. And I ended up getting Augusta in a suit. And I ended up on top. So that was a good thing. So I thought that was in the policing. You know, I'm done here. But John Harrison, who was the chief at the time, who handpicked all his officers, because he picked local. He had a tendency to hire guys from the community. He knew people, he knew friends, he had kids that wanted to go through policing. So they would, he'd give them all a try. Well, he decided to give me a try. He hired me as a dispatcher. Well, anyone who's done anything like that knows you have to type. Well, these sausage fingers don't type. So I had to take little typing courses, and I had to learn how to file and stuff like that. And a lot of people I worked with, it was more of a female-dominant area, but for me it was a foot in the door to advance myself up. And as long as I could not fall flat on my face, I had a shot. So I technically started in 88, and I started in the auxiliary program. And it was pretty exciting. So when I finally got hired in 1990, at that point, there was only 17 police officers around. And it's hard to look back now that we had 4 cars. We were driving a station wagon, Chev 4-door cars, like nothing fancy. I don't think we ever bought a new car. I was there when we first started, and that was how the budget worked. And the budget back then was under $1 million. So, and I had to look into that. You couldn't find that anywhere. I had to call Pat Ryan, who was our deputy chief, who's down in Prince Edward Island, I think. And of course, he reminded me of some things I should be reminded of. I'll tell you later. But during that time, he said, you know, the budget, not even $1 million we spend, was unbelievable. It was a lot of money. And everybody knows, anyone who has anything to do with special services or work in the community knows that most of those wages are all salaries and equipment. So at the end of the day, there's not what they'd say much meat on the bone for advancing stuff. So I left there, went into community services. I got moved up to cadet, and that's when we had cadet programs. And if some people have ever had anyone go through policing, sometimes back then it was more on luck and who you knew to get in. It may be that way now too. So on the start of all that, I got very successful. We then took over the township, the OPP, at that time, where Sobeys is now. And they ran the rural area, the highways, and we ran right up to Highway 89 almost at that point. And they did the marsh. And I'm probably telling just what you guys already know. But back then we used to, for firearms example, we had a 38. So, I mean, those things would bounce off windshields. But, I mean, they weren't much of a firearm, but that's what we had. And as we advanced on, we went into what they call 9mm semi-automatics. And capacity changed from 6 shots to 14 shots. And then carrying 18 bullets to carrying 45 bullets. So where I'm going with this is, as policing moved up, so did the weight on our belts. So if you were my size, you're carrying already 45 extra pounds. So you got your belt, you got your vest, and the vest back then had different kind of plates in it that they have now. They almost felt like steel, but they were pretty good. During all that time, in I guess it was 1992 is when we took over the township. That was pretty big for us. That was a huge adjustment. We went from working within 3 kilometers and, you know, running the VI, the Queens, and all those bars that kept us busy on a regular basis, to all of a sudden being out in the township, dealing with cattle on the road, and farmer complaints, and just even speeding complaints out on back roads. All of a sudden they became a big issue for us. We were lucky, we kind of had a couple aces in the hole back then. I mentioned Andy Van Dyke. Well, Andy knew every lot in construction out there. And if he didn't, Peggy did. Because Peggy ended up being a dispatcher with our police service. And of course you have one in the station, and now you got Andy on the road. So, and if you know Andy, he had a tendency at 2:30 in the morning when you're trying to slow down and just relax to run every plate at the Husky to try to find a stolen vehicle. So it was kind of hard on guys that maybe try to grab a nap or whatever. So from 92 on, we started to grow a little bit. We didn't get a lot of, I guess you would say, extra road officers. They started to build units. So they started putting more civilians in to help with ground briefs, which is what we do when we arrest somebody. We have to do an arrest report. We have to do a synopsis. We have to do record checks. We have to do all the background that goes into a folder, and then it's sent off to court. And then we started getting community-based police officers, people that we could put in the schools. But we're still not getting a lot on the road yet. We moved quickly to 1997. In 1997, we were in the process of trying to amalgamate with Barrie and Innisfil. And it looked like a done deal. Everybody was on board. It was going to be one big service. And what ended up happening, 11 o'clock hour, Barry didn't want to do it. Rumor has they couldn't decide who wanted to be chief, or who was going to be chief, so there's a little standoff there. So we ended up just amalgamating with Innisfil. And our population started to really grow. Bradford started to expand, not as fast as Innisfil did, but we were expanding. But our calls of service were higher than theirs. And again, being a budget-wise, you think, well, they should pay more because it's a bigger area and resources, but in this case, it worked out because of our call volume. So again, there was always two councils. That's the problem, you have two different councils and two jurisdictions. Nobody wants to pay more than the other. So you could have 47-53 and that would cause a fight. But back then you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. As we advanced, so did our equipment. So we amalgamated with Innisfil, they had a tackle team. So it was pretty interesting, you know. I think we got the better deal because they had a lot more stuff than Bradford. So when we all got together, they started dividing things up. And they started taking guys from Innisfil and moved them to Bradford. They took guys from Bradford and they moved them to Innisfil. That didn't sit well, because if you ask a guy in Innisfil, he said, I didn't sign up the police in Bradford. And Bradford guys, I never signed up the police in Innisfil. I don't want to go all the way up there, I live down here. But that's how it had to work, so if you had problems or issues and you had to get from A to B, you knew how to get there. And two different types of policing. Anyone who knows when you drive from here and you go on the other side of 89, two different types of weather. Well, I would say it's exactly how it is in the type of policing and the type of calls you have. In Bradford, one of the big concerns we had was all the different minorities. We had a big population of Portuguese, Italian, and then it just kept going from there, and more nationalities started, or different cultures started to come in. And when that happened, now we had to start hiring according to the people who were policing. And that only made sense. So we started hiring minorities, and whatever the percentage was, is what we would hire in policing to try to match it. You can imagine stopping someone who didn't speak English and try to process them. It was a very trying times, because you couldn't give them their rights properly. And when you couldn't do that, that gave them a loophole out come court time. And that was a big issue, for example, like MAD. MAD tracks all our impaireds. And when they see that someone has got off for impaired, they want to know why they got off for impaired. It's not right. And so they'll background cases and find out. So it's interesting to see how MAD started supporting the police service more and more, and we started supporting them more. And what came from that was a simple thing like, I'm trying to remember his name, it had to do with we could call in and we could say what language we required, and within a very short time they would have someone call us back and we do three-way conversations. Now we can do it on our phone. Now we can just go on our phone and it'll pick the language up and we'll translate whatever we want to them and whatever they say to us. So it's that's where I would say phones is the most helpful for policing today's moving forward. On the other hand, it can also bite you in the ass because everyone takes pictures now. Everything is instant, so you can't really hide. Quick side note, I had to get out of policing as cameras came in because it wasn't going to work well for me. Anyone who's had their picture put up on Facebook and didn't know about it, someone said, oh, I saw you on Facebook. You're like, well, I never said they could do that. It's the same with policing. We don't have a choice. We're public servants, so if someone puts something up or says anything, that's what they got. Before I started, and some of you might remember, and it might be a wise tale, I don't know, but they used to say when a call came in, the red light above the DI would go on. And that would mean they had to go to a phone and call in to get what the call was. And I mean, that's coming from Andy, so I'm not sure how true it was. He had a sense to pull my leg a little bit. But, and anyone who's ever been in where I started policing, the old Bradford haunted houses we call it, the most injuries we ever had there was trying to go up the stairs. Because they had these round stairs that went up. Every year someone got hurt on them. So And everyone who's been to the VI knows how exciting that can be. So as a young guy in that situation going in there, it was a different type of policing. We didn't have to be so respectful. You could deal with people according to how they dealt with you. And the people that we worked for directly, sergeants, some from the military and on, they encouraged us to do that. So and that was okay, but no one ever really got hurt. So we had a shootout in the back of our station. You might not know about it. You might have heard about it. But shortly after, just when the time I was being promoted to constable, we arrested a guy in the main area of Bradford, and his buddy didn't take too well to it. So he decided when they were bringing him in the back door of the old house in the garage there that he was going to show up with his gun and get him out. And he took a couple shots and put some holes in the back, but that's as far as it got. And lucky for us, an off-duty officer caught him running. So, yeah, so there was always a little excitement going on around our station. A lot of pranks too. At that time, Bruce Davis was the deputy chief. John Harrison was chief. Bruce moved from our service to Innisfil and took over being chief there. So when the amalgamation happened, it was, am I talking too fast? No? Okay. If you have any questions anytime, just throw it at me. Because you guys probably know more than I do about that time. I was on the inside, I wasn't out here, so. So what ended up happening at that time in my career is when the amalgamation happened, now we had a chief, 3 deputy chiefs, 2 inspectors, and 4 sergeants. That's pretty top heavy for I mean, I don't think Toronto had that at the time, but here we were, at that point we now moved up to about 60 officers, 50 officers, and went through that. During those times, we had a hiring freeze for about 7 years, so no one got hired. We worked with what we had. 2 communities were fighting over budgets. Nobody wanted to pay anymore, and everybody wanted better shape for their money. But we also had Lake Simcoe, so we had to run a boat because we were responsible for our share of the lake. And Barrie City met us at the point. We're just past where Friday Harbor is. York Region on their part, and the OPP, when they came down from Arroyo, would assist all of us. It all depended on who had a boat on at the time. So now you also have to have scooters. So we had scooters. So when you have all these things, you have to have units. And these units cost money. So we would, not so much fundraise, but we would look at other ways to make money or make cuts. Then the computer age came. So once we amalgamated, and we're already at this point, I'm away working on another unit. I've been promoted into the drug unit for 5 years, and I get to travel. I get to fly in helicopters and small planes. Took me a little adjusting in the planes. I may have puked once or twice in them. You can't help when they drop all of a sudden 10 feet in the air. You can't change anything there. So we would go on from there, and some of the exciting things when I was in the drugs is not so much the enjoyment of being that kind of a crew. There was 3 crews technically. There was the Heroic Combined Forces, what we call our Barrie unit. Then we had our Halbert unit that we called the Dark Sides, because they all looked like hobbits. They all were short and they had beards, and you didn't even know who they were until we'd all get together for our meetings. And then we had our Toronto crew. So we would all help each other on big warrants and big days. During that time, I was fortunate enough to be part of Molson. When that went down, that could have been a lot better. It didn't work out the way it should have, but a couple of people jumped the gun, and we lost a lot through it. But that's a live and learn, and that's almost like why people have to talk. Different agencies have to talk, and we've grown from there. During the drug, I would say we spent a lot of time in the high schools doing small buys. Big job back then for us was running informants. And informants was a big part of policing. but we could do things different back there. We had lots of cash. Ontario Provincial Police were funding us, so if I needed $1,000, I could go get $1,000 an hour. Whatever I needed, I could get. You had to do up these little T4 slips handed in, you were responsible for it, you signed for it, and you could do whatever. But I got to travel all the way from Kingston. I got to work down in the penitentiaries. Got to work months in Midland, Peterborough. Sometimes it was just as simple as being a cover officer. Other times I was responsible for all seizures, so guys with bikes. You had different guys working all over. Anytime they made a buy or a transaction or a meet, I would receive it. So I got to stay away from home, but again, it caused issues of my own home. Being married at the time with 2 young kids, my kids didn't know what I did for a living, because I never wore a uniform then. And I drove a different vehicle every month. So it wasn't until they were 5 or 6 and I realized what I did for a living as a police officer. Because the kids, everything you see is in a uniform, so they didn't know the difference. Now the budget by this point has jumped up to 18 million. It's quite a jump. But what happened is all the use of force stuff comes in. And when use of force comes in, everybody has to have it. Different firearms have to be issued. Tasers became a big thing. We didn't carry nightsticks anymore. I still have one. We don't carry them. We went to what they call asps. And they're batons that go over to 3-stage, and you just flip them out and they lock. So, and they're made of stainless steel. Pretty nice things to have. But, never worked the way on people that you think would. In training, it always hurt. But when we did something to somebody else, it didn't seem to bother them. So you had to find another way to do it. They were mentioning about we started hiring them. So now we got a 7-8 year freeze, and we haven't had any hiring. So what's happened now is our whole police service is growing by people all the same age. And we have this big void of nobody for 7-8 years. So then when promotion started, we got 12 guys trying to get one job. I say guys, females, everybody, trying to get one job. And when we got near where we are now in the last 4 years, the South Simcoe Police Service has lost over 40% of their policemen, and all in the high end, the people up here. So I got promoted roughly with 23 years of service on. Now they're promoting at 4 and 5 years on. And it's tough. It's not that they're not capable of doing it, but a lot of people in policing now don't have the same worldly experiences. A lot of them still live at home, play PlayStation on the days off. It's not like we went out and worked. Most of us did. We had side jobs, we did stuff, we played hockey, we got together. It doesn't appear to be that. When I was leaving, the younger people, they were more interested in planning trips, seeing what days they could get off. It was hard to get people to work overtime, actually. And when I came through overtime, we fought for it. Took an overtime shift because it was just such a bonus to have. But you talk to the sergeants now, and I'm very fortunate. A lot of guys that are sergeants came through on my platoon. And some of them now have gone past sergeant and are staff sergeants. So that's how quick they're moving up on the service we had. Being that in my 31 rough years of policing, I went through 5 chiefs. Every one of them different. Like I said, I started with John Harrison. And John Harrison went from being a constable to a chief. So that'll tell you how things changed. He didn't do sergeant, staff sergeant. That's how it worked for him. And back then, that's how a lot of it worked. But now you have to go through all these courses. I brought a book with me there, and all this book here is all the courses I've been on. And it's everything from sexual assaults, dealing with children, infant deaths, how to make crack cocaine, fatals. It's right from start to finish. And then I was very fortunate to have all the courses that I went. But when you have those courses, you have to use those courses. So guys that were doing the same thing as I did, we had to go to a lot of sudden deaths. We're involved in a lot of suicides. And it just happens to be that's part of something we have to do a lot of. There wasn't a lot of back then going to see counseling about it. You never went and talked to anybody about it. That's just, you deal with it and move on. Or be more resilient, I think, word is. That all sounds good and feels good, but you still have to deal with it somewhere. And it's tough when you still have to go back and visit the families, especially if they're doing infant deaths. Sometimes we can't give them the young ones back for days. We can't even give the stuff we seize back. And that wears on you, because it wears on them, because they're filling you every hour of the hour. And that's a part of the job that really didn't like doing death notifications, but we did it. And so then we learned that, we need to be trained on that better. So we started taking courses on being more compassionate, show more empathy, and not just stop by and say, this is what's happening to me. Now when we go to a death notification, for example, we've already contacted several agencies. We take people with us. We make sure that we don't leave till we have other family members there. It's important that we just don't leave people, because we're doing it sometimes for other agencies. So that kind of stuff I was happy to see change. The training that officers get now is far more in depth. When I went to police college, it was about arrests. It was about impaired drivers. It was about thefts. It was all that kind of stuff. Now it's about they're teaching culture, which is important. You go into certain homes, you should take your shoes off, depending on what you're there for. Right? And you spend time with people differently now than we did. In Innisfil, it was done. Almost every third house in Innisfil when we started policing had a 22 behind the door. It just happened to be the way it was. Two types of policing. Once we got over Highway 89, we policed different than when we policed at this end. We gave the same service. It's just we realized people live differently in different places, and we have to remember that. We were known for radar driving. Anyone who knows Bradford knows you don't speed in Bradford. You're going to get a ticket. Bad point is, the traffic unit was set up in Bradford Station, not in the North Station. So when they started here, a lot of people got tickets. So when we took over and amalgamated with Innisfil, it was a big uproar. Because our traffic guys were like, oh, new area, new victims. And they did. They were coming in with like 25 tickets each a day. And there were some that had more, because they lived and breathed traffic. They had radars that went this way, that way. They could stop. Now you see what they got with the lasers. They've had for the last 6-7 years. They can get you 3/4 of a kilometer down before detectors can tell there's a detector. And they got detectors of detectors. So it's pretty neat that certain automobile companies will sell cars that already have radar detectors in them. But what's happened is now the new radars can detect the detectors. So it's kind of funny how they keep trying to outdo each other on detectors instead of just slowing down. Newton Robinson was the trap of all traps. I was afraid to come through here. OPP were always sitting down in that garage. And I did get stopped a few times, and thank God I knew who they were. I'll tell you, it doesn't matter if you're a police officer or not, you still get, oh crap. And you get a little nervous, and you're embarrassed a little bit, but you do what you have to. One of the funny things we do is in Bradford, the last few years I worked as the fire department right beside us. Well, we knew what they did at night sometimes. So I always told the guys in my platoon, you go by, hit your horn. So they go by because their bunkers are at the back. And we hit the siren, and we get a text pretty quickly, mind your own business. You could have been a fireman. So we don't let them sleep too much over there. We try to run our sirens a little bit. But you know what? We all worked well together. A lot of us came on with the fire guys. Same with the Innisfil guys. In Bradford, we called the Innisfil guy cowboys, right? And they thought the guys in Bradford were just, none of us were all, well, I didn't say what they said we were. But it wasn't nice. They thought we were all whipped. Because what else do you do in Bradford when there's nothing happening? You did radar. In Innisfil, they went out for lunch. They went for breakfast. So when we swapped up, we learned to go out for lunch and breakfast, and they learned to do radar. But so I'm moving on there from that. in 2002 we lost Officer Kuzmich. He was putting out a spike belt for a stolen vehicle, and the guy chasing him. It was his. There was two people involved in this stuff. They went in a truck to a guy's house in Innisfil to buy his high-end motorcycle. The one guy said, "I'll take it. I'll leave my truck." So the guy said, "Yeah, take the bike for a ride." Bike didn't come back. And then he saw the truck move, so there was a guy hiding in the truck. So the owner took on after the truck. Well, the truck ended up striking an Officer Kuzmich, putting on a spike belt. It was just sheer bad luck, bad location. Should never happen. The guy on the motorcycle, he crashed on the 25th and died. So it looked kind of weird that, you know, if we lose an officer, this guy dies 3 hours later. But he was long gone before we got him. Found him. Because no one knew, right? The corner in which he gone, no one saw the motorcycle or saw him. But where I'm going with is, when that happened, I ended up being gone for 6 months with Brad Reynolds from Bonhead. We ended up being put on that investigation with Toronto Police, and we spent a lot of time in all the people involved in King City, downtown Toronto. They were involved in a big theft ring, and of course we didn't know it. York Region was well aware of it because they had a crew working them, but 6 months later we were very successful in getting them all. We almost lost them. We almost had to go to Israel for one, Pakistan for the other, and they got one of them at the airport. But that's, again, who would have ever guessed? You know, that's how far that investigation went, but it took 6 months just to track them. And that's where technology came into play. The phone. We were able to track everything by tower dumps, they're called. And as you drive along, me coming down from Barrie today, I probably hit 6 towers. So they can almost, you know, breadcrumb you right to here. And so that's a big part of it. And then they can zoom in. There's technology out there right now that you can circle a school and it will tell you every call coming up. It will, if you're on Messenger, if you're whatever it is that service you use, they can highlight Val, they can highlight Rogers, it doesn't matter what it is. And any conversations, texts coming out of there will come up out of the cloud. It's quite the way technology's gone today. And if you think it's gone, it's not. They can do it from 7 days past. So that's why so many of these cases that have gone to court now are stuff that they can drop back on just through your phones. But the bad guys are getting smarter because we disclose all this. So they're learning to leave their phones at home. And they buy burner phones, just ones they pay as they go. So, but that's how that goes. I had the prior, I guess it'd be about 2011, I was in a pursuit. Unexpected to me, I was in it. I was the acting sergeant for the night. I went down to Alcona to the gas station there at the petrol can. And as I pulled in, I noticed the car in front of me was a Porsche. And it had a special license plate on it. Well, that Porsche had been in 6 pursuits in the last week. Been involved in an armed robbery, taking guys at gunpoint. The last thing I was just starting shift, so I was just coming to fuel. And there it was, sitting right in front of me. There was a car in front of it, so I called it in, and I saw a female pumping the gas. And she saw me. So I lit him up, the lights and everything, and as I come up to the side of the door to engage him, he threw it in reverse, right into the front of my crate. And then he hit the car in front of me. Thank God nobody was in it. They were in pain for their gas. Then he hit my cruiser again. By this time I'm like, ah. So the last thing you want to do as your acting sergeant is you don't want to get in trouble. You don't want to have any, because you don't want to get promoted, right? But the old me came back, and I got in. He took off for what they call the Fork and Spoon restaurant right down there. And I hooked onto him with my front bumper because we had those big deer racks on it. I was going to ride him right up the wheelchair ramp right into the Fork and Spoon and park him there. But I hit a bump, and I came unhooked. We both spun, and he made for the 25th. It was a Friday night, so there's nowhere for him to go north because everyone's going north, so he comes south. And I had done a shot at him. Thank goodness he wasn't that good a driver, and he skipped a gear. And he had just a pause, and I took him in the door, straight across and flipped him into the ditch. And my car was on top of his car. He was in the ditch. I was in a bit of a predicament there. I got out. By this time I could hear cars coming from all over. And this guy, well known to us, and armed. So it had a soft top, this Porsche. And I come around the window and I see him. I got him at gunpoint. You know, I'm going to take some precautions here. And I just remember this female officer, she showed up. She says, "What do you want to do?" I says, "You take him, I'm going to get my taser." I got my taser and I said to him, "I know, you know who I am, I know who you are. Keep your hands where I can see it," because he was trying to push the door up to get in. And then our dog handler showed up. His name was Brent, big guy. Like, just huge, solid. Yeah, he rides his bike from Barrie to Bradford to go to work. A bicycle. I didn't drive that far. This guy's riding it every day. So he shows up and says, "We're going to take him up to the roof." So we cut through the soft top of the roof, and his hands came out like a chicken out of an egg, and out he came, and nobody was holding the dog. Dog got on him. So anyways, at the end of the day, it was the guy with the Porsche wanted nothing to do with the Porsche. He was happy he got wrecked, because all he kept seeing was his Porsche on the news. Police involved in a high-speed chase. And I think he came through Guildford that afternoon at about 160. So no one was pursuing it. And I wouldn't pursue it normally, but it was very low speeds. So it was good. As we moved up into the promotional stage, why don't we stop and ask if anyone's got any questions? Anything at all?
Well, I got one.
Fire away.
Can you go through the different police ranks? Like when you start to the chief, what are the different ranks?
Sure, okay. So, we usually start from auxiliary. A lot of our police officers are hired through auxiliary. They come and they work for free, ride with the officers, help with parades, go on calls. And they participate in a lot of events we do. They don't carry firearms. They are trained in using of a shotgun, or now a 223, which is in every car. And their main objective is to be police presence. And that's how it was. Even in the Bradford days when I was back there, they would have me go out with nothing, no firearm, not just sit in the car and kind of just let people know there's a police car there. And yet I wasn't doing anything, I was just sitting in the car. I wasn't going to calls. So you go from auxiliary now, and then you depends on which route you go. If you go up through the civilian way, which is you become a dispatcher, communicator, you work in records, or in the courts, or you go the other way and you try to go through policing. And so then from auxiliary you go to a cadet, and a cadet is a training for a constable. He can be armed or not armed, depending on the chief's wishes. That's usually about a year long, and then they get promoted to constable. Sometimes they go down to the Ontario Police College as cadets, come back as constables. That's a way not to have to pay them full wage until they get back after 3 months. So, and when I went, if you passed, the service paid for you. Now you pay yourself. But I see Doug Ford's, he's kind of changed it again, and they're looking more at people coming out of grade 12, right? When I got hired, it was more the military style kind of policing, and now it's more the educator. So a lot of people coming out have to have degrees in criminology. They have had some kind of university degree, doesn't matter what it is, as long as it benefits the service in some way. It shows commitment. It shows, because everybody who has kids and grandkids realizes that they got rid of grade 13. When they got rid of grade 13, we started sending kids off to school at 17. Right? And then who knows what they want to do at 17? And grade 13 taught them how to study. And a lot of kids went to university and college and weren't ready for it. So, big change in that. So then you go constable, and you have to be a first-class constable, which takes 4 years before you can apply to get a sergeant. Usually you have to be a first-class constable where you can apply to be in any unit. Whether it's a tactical unit, a traffic unit, before you can start moving around, they want you to have a little taste of everything. And they'll move you around into units in the sense that you go to the traffic unit for 6 months, go to the criminal investigation branch for 6 months, just to see if it's really where you want to go. And then you go from that to first class constable, and then you can go into a training officer, which means that you will now have people riding with you, and you'll be like a role model for them. New recruits coming in, new hires, they would get a training officer depending on the chief. It was usually for 3 months, but you have to keep details. Every day they had to do so many calls. They had to be able to, at the end of, like I would get them on my desk at the end of every week, their book, to see what stage they're at. And then I would comment on them. Like, I noticed he hasn't been doing any domestic calls, so I would change the call, any domestics in that area, I want him going to it. Because I want him to get the experience. So, because domestics are a pretty major thing in policing. Anytime you go to domestics, someone's leaving the house. We don't make that choice. It's mandated. So it's hard because you tear a family apart. Right? You take someone away for 5-6 weeks so they get their first court appearance. Can you really help them? I don't know. Because now you got a single parent, and they have to get special orders from the courts to be able to see each other, do things. So that moves on. And then we go from that to trying to be promoted into sergeant. At the same level, you can try to be a detective constable, move into the criminal investigation branch, move into the traffic units, and they get everything's got a pay bump attached to it, like a percentage. So you get a little bit more for specialized. And then you go to sergeant. They like you to be a sergeant for at least 2 to 3 years before you try the rank of staff sergeant. And staff sergeant, now you're off the road pretty much. You have a staff sergeant that will oversee all the platoons. You have a staff sergeant that will oversee all the specialty units, traffic, criminal, and all that. And then you'll have a staff sergeant that looks after the day-to-day operation of the service. You know, can we get a better deal on cars, weapons, anything that courses officers, because officers have to have certain courses every year. Every 2 years they have to have a first aid course. So simply, we train twice a year for firearms and use of force. We're only required to do once, but we do twice. Because you think about it, most people we hired, some people we hired just got their license a couple of years ago to try to be police officers. They never had a license. So they get a car license, now you put them in a $130,000 police car and then, expect them to be able to perform in certain things. Same with firearms. A lot of police officers have never touched a firearm in their life until they became a police officer. And now you're asking them to make decisions that, are seconds long. So it's important that constantly keep putting them through calls and training and setting them up for that kind of stuff. In policing, a lot of police services have two-man cars, two-person cars, sorry. We never had that. We were always one-person cars. We didn't have the ability to do that. Even now, when I retired, I had between 10 and 11 on my roster working, but reality is I had 7 or 8 because someone was either on holidays, on a course, drawn away to another service for some kind of incident that's coming up, and it was just impossible to ever. I don't think once in my 8 years as a sergeant that I ever had a full platoon. So, maybe the first week of January. No one wants to start using their holidays. And as a sergeant, you become more of a babysitter than you become anything. You get all the complaints, the whining. I don't want to work with them. I don't want to do this. And then it starts off that why do they get to start at 6 and I start at 7? And so you kind of got to smooth everybody around a little bit and give somebody and take something from somebody else. And that was okay. It worked both ways. And as a sergeant, you were responsible for all their stats to make sure that they were doing what they're supposed to do. Someone driving for 12 hours or out working should at least be able to say they attended 5 calls. Maybe hit some traffic complaint areas, did some foot patrols. If they're not doing it, I want to know what they're doing all day. And it got harder and harder for them not to do stuff because I could track them. I knew where they were at all times. They all had phones now. So I knew where they were personally. By just going on my computer and hitting car 207, I could see what they've done from morning to night. I can see how many miles they ran. I can track their speed. I wasn't like that. I was not a micromanager, so I didn't really care unless my thing flashed. And it only flashed when they were 40 kilometers over the speed limit. But in most cases, 95% of the time, when that happened, they were on their way to a call that required something. So that's why I didn't really pay too much attention to it unless someone else gave me a call first. And then promotions, I was responsible for doing their yearly evaluations. When you first come onto the service, you get evaluated at 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and a year. And you have to do full evaluations on them because they can be released at that time at any time. And we try not to do that because we've already put so much money into them, and training and time. Maybe another month will bring them around. So you don't want to give up the 12 months you have if it only takes another month or maybe someone different to train them. So we did that. Dispatchers and officers sometimes don't see eye to eye. And there's conflicts back and forth. Whining, complaining, calling up and saying, well, give them that call, not me. Well, I gotta tell you, I drove me nuts. I hated that stuff. But it happened. You know, when you have kids, you know, I didn't do it, they did it. So, in 2023, the budget now for the South Simcoe Police Service is inflated up to almost 25 million. So, and you would think, wow, that's huge. Well, again, 90% of that's all wages. So, when I leave, they can hire 2 new officers for the same price. So at first, it's a great saving. A guy like me leaves, we can pay 2 officers and bring our numbers back up. So a whole bunch of us leave because we're all in that 30 to 35 years working. And all of a sudden, all these young guys come in. Well, yeah, you get the officers back up, but now you've lost that 7, 8 years skill sets, I think you could say. Not so much you're smarter than them, because they're smarter than us in a lot of ways. They come in and they're teaching us computer stuff. How to do things, how to tap into things, how to use our phones. And so we learn from them just as much as they learn from us. The big thing in policing is camaraderie. Like just getting out with my platoon, taking them out. I would have shift parties, take them out to my cottage, have them over to my pool, just getting them out just to enjoy ourselves. And then we did the same too with their wives or husbands. We didn't just have it about us. We started to learn that you had to include everybody. Because, you know, they also go through probably just as much at home as we do at work. So we started including them. In policing, we used to have big parties. That kind of went to the wayside as people started to detach themselves from the groups. There wasn't so much people getting together as much. It turned out that when I left, it was guys in my era still getting together and doing stuff. And the younger guys, we never heard from them. They were gone. And we would phone them for overtime, like I told you, and we couldn't get them to come in. They did not want to come in. Nope. I don't want to work. I don't want to work. Okay, that's fine. But I don't know where everybody went. They've been trying to hire police officers, and they just can't find them. I know that sounds weird. You would think there's all people lined up to have it. There's not. No. They've interviewed sometimes people that were let go. They brought them back. Maybe give them another try. See if maybe now they reach on what we're looking for. And you can get cut for just about anything. You know, you're driving. You know, you've done something way back when you never disclosed. You get cut. So it's tough to find people that want to expose themselves like that and get turned down. So we're starting to work in the colleges now. So we're at Georgian College, we're at Brilliant Campus, we're Owen Sound Campus, trying to recruit people to come over to our service. But so is everybody else. Toronto went from 2 officer cars, right? Well, when they stopped that, they had a whole bunch of guys retire. So they had all these openings. So we were all stealing from each other. And it got to the point where we steal 4 and they steal 3. So we were never any further ahead. We were losing as quick as we were stealing. So for me, in my career, I finished off my last 6 months working at the North, just being in charge of the North Station. No more nights, just working days, overseeing the building itself, overlooking all the stats, occurrences. So I got to read everything everybody did. So I would just check to make sure things were dealt with properly. If it was a domestic and there wasn't charges, why wasn't there a charge? Impairs, what stopped it at this point that we never proceeded on a charge, anything like that. So anything that came from the courts, a lot of time would come to me and I would have to figure out why it happened. So I got to meet the sergeants because I would cover every platoon, working Monday to Friday. And it was a good, I think, start to being retired because I wasn't doing shift work anymore. It allowed me to kind of just let things go and come back. Yep.
So as a sergeant, were you behind a desk then, or are you still in the car?
Not for my last 6 months, but as a sergeant up to that point,
Yeah.
yeah, I was going to all calls.
Just
Anything,
looking at
I spent a lot of time on the road. Yeah,
Okay.
I would travel. When I got promoted, we had 2 sergeants. That lasted 2 years. We went to 1 sergeant running the whole thing. And what they decided to do is bump 4 into staff sergeant positions, working days. So they put a lot of pressure on the sergeants, trying to run from Bradford to Innisfil. It could be 5 o'clock, you're done at 6, and you get a sudden death down in the marsh, you were going to it. If you got a call and it was in Friday Harbor, well, Friday Harbor is still almost a half an hour from our North Station. It's no short jaunt, so it's about an hour and 20 minutes from corner to corner to drive to, and that's on good conditions. So it was, and then if you're a backup officer, we were saying about taking on a lot of Metro officers over the years. They came up and they found it quite challenging. They thought, this would be a little easier pace of policing. They lived up here, they liked that they didn't have to do the drive anymore. What they brought with them was a lot of experience, so we would harness that and use that to our benefit. But they quickly realized that they also didn't have the same backup. You had to be very good at talking. You had to be able to remind yourself you are allowed to step back. You don't have to engage, because you may be alone for 10, 15 minutes. And that was just the reality of policing in the rural area and South Simcoe. So that's why it was popular for a while, and then for a while we couldn't get anybody. And then we could do it again. We could get people coming. So, but that's how I went. And then you move up to staff sergeant, and then you can move from staff sergeant to inspector. And we usually have 2 inspectors, and then you got a deputy chief and a chief. So when I left, we had 2. We only had 1 inspector, 1 deputy, and 1 chief. When I started, we had 1 chief, 3 deputy chiefs, 2 inspectors, and 4 staffs.
So what does the inspector do?
The inspector, he would be in charge of discipline.
Or just
He was in charge of anything to do with within the Police Service Act. That was his main thing. He was in charge of special events. So, for example, when we had the big concerts in Innisfil, in the summer, it was just his job to make sure the right people were overseeing it, make sure they have everything they need, boats are there. So he had a lot of stuff to do, but he was the buffer. If it went past the inspector, then it was kind of serious. If the inspector couldn't solve the problem, or if I got charged, I would go before him as a hearing officer.
Right.
And they would try to deal with it at that point, and if they couldn't, then they would move on to the formal state part.
When you watch all these police shows, there are always these detectives out there looking at murder scenes. Were there no detectives with the Bradford Police, or?
Yep, I was a detective.
You were a detective?
Yeah, I worked,
So where does that fit in with your constable, sergeant?
well, that was a constable, moved into what we call the general investigators for a few years. And at that time I was involved in work in homicides. That's how I ended away on the Hal Kuzmich investigation. Anything major there, I belonged to a surveillance team.
Yeah.
So we could piggyback off the investigation if I wasn't required to run surveillance. In surveillance, sometimes we sat on guys for 3 or 4 weeks. We wouldn't move. So yeah, so we detective constables would come in on anything major that couldn't be dealt with at this stage. So sudden deaths, we always had a detective. Major investigations to do with motor vehicle collisions, trains, so always the traffic unit, because they had detectives within the traffic unit.
Okay.
So, and because nowadays you have to write a warrant for everything. Even if we know Joe Blow's in the house over there, we have to write a fee warrant to go in there. Unless it's not his house, then that's different. But yeah, so that's where that's kind of in the stepping stone to sergeant, because then they have detective sergeants too. And a detective sergeant would hold the rank of staff sergeant.
Okay.
So it's just because you get a premium for being in those units. Otherwise, nobody would go to it. Nobody would give up their time to be on call and stuff like that.
So tell us, so you were with this criminal investigative unit, so you must have some really good stories about that you can share with us, or?
Well, you know what? The trailer investigation was a pretty interesting one.
Okay.
We ended up stopping a trailer that someone said was their trailer. And we got looking into it. Well, it was part of the public clubs for the Hells Angels. And they're known as the Iron Dragons. And it turned out that what they were doing is stealing all these closed-in trailers, campers, and trucks, rebinning them under the same, all their bins would start with HA. They weren't the smartest guys. And then they would sell them out. And we were starting to pick them up at the 400 flea market. So then we did an offline search, it's called under anything under HA. We would use certain numbers that were in these characteristics. Well, they wouldn't stop printing. And they just come up, and they were all over Innisfil. They were all over Bradford. They were all over New Tech. They were in North Bay. So we, one by one, started taking them all down. And every one of them was stolen. And there's ways to track them. We can trace the axles. There's numerous places on there. We were trained on identifying vehicles when we were in the property crime unit. The OPP were the specialists in that, and we would use them. They'd work with us. They're the same guys right now that have all been brought back to work for all these stolen autos. These guys I was working with, they were all going to Africa. Just that's where the containers were all going. And it's a huge, they just come out with what, 3.2 billion that they're going to put into it. So, which is huge, because when only 12 or 14% of canisters, for example, that are checked at the ports, your odds are pretty good you're going to get them through. So that's where they all go. And so in that investigation there, like we took down counselors that had these trailers. These are the same guys that go to the, you know, like the boat show, and the big one for RVs, and these guys weren't shy. They go in with good coveralls on, go in and say, yeah, at 12 o'clock at night, take down all the barriers, and the security go, what are you doing? Oh, we're putting the new ones in. We're taking the new ones up and bringing the new ones in. Hook onto them, and drive off with every one. And no one stops them. You walk out with 5, you know, fifth wheels and all these things, and drive them right off the lot. And it would take to the next morning when they come in, like, where's this? Well, they were bringing the new ones in. They're not bringing it in again. And they were all tied to tow trucks. So that then opened a whole new can of things. And that was during the time when all the tow trucks were being burned. And I think in Innisfil we lost 5 or 6. And but all these trailers kept coming in. Curry's Towing, I think, stopped taking calls from us. Yeah, we need you to come get another one. We were filling their yards up with trucks, trailers, motor homes. We were going as far as Sturgeon Falls to go. And the neat thing is, every time you got a trailer, just about everything in it was stolen too. Skidoos, so it got too big. That's what happened. It went from one trailer, you know, now we got 100 trailers. And that was all in a very short time. It was a little embarrassing for some of the counselors. They didn't want to comment how they got their trailer. So we just shook them loose and took the trailer on them. Left it at that. But yeah, so those kind of investigations are huge. For me, the biggest thing is I love surveillance. I like following people. I like going to Quebec. You know, going over the border and coming back, or even just locally. So part of my job in the drug unit at that time too was I was responsible for anything in our area, overseeing. And if something needed done, I would bring the team in here. And that's what we did. We went to each other's areas, and we would just do weeks and weeks of work, undercover clothes. Put together a project that was only 3 or 4 weeks long, and we'd go and just see how many people we could buy from. We did one mistake though, not proud of it, but it did happen. We were married, and we decided that we were going to use the wheelchair thing. And we were downtown, and we had guys set up different spots. And we had a guy that we told, just an exhibit guy, every time you get an exhibit, you take it to him. He puts it in the catalog and weighs it and checks it, and he puts it away. Well, I'm pushing a guy from Midland around in a wheelchair, and we'd stop and buy ecstasy. You know, get a gram of coke, buy a quarter-pound of weed, whatever, you know, hash, it didn't matter what it was. We were just seeing how much we could buy. And every time we bought it, we made a point of where we were, and somebody was taking our picture to make sure we could ID this guy later. Well, it turns out everybody was going to one guy, and he was sitting in the park down there. But that takes the day to find out, because you just get a little closer each time, you can't just follow them, right? And at the end, when we arrested the last guy, he thought our guy, he stood up out of the wheelchair. Hey, you can walk! It's like, well, the next guy in a wheelchair that tried to buy dope in the next couple of weeks practically got beat up. So they put out an apology on that one. And the chief and Barry didn't think very highly of us for a little while. Anyways. But there was things always going on. Sleds, didn't matter what it was.
So when you were on surveillance or undercover, did you go home to your wife at night, or were you?
Well, locally, yes. Because it depends. That kind of stuff never started till, depends on what we were on. Some things, if it was what they call down takedown week, we would start a week early, and all the teams would come together and have targets. And we would run with 5-6 guys. And our job for 5 or 6 guys is from the moment he wakes up, we put that guy to bed. Wherever he goes, we go. Until warrant day, all the warrants are ready, and then we take them off. And if it was something he was involved in, like even if he was committing a crime, unless it was violence, we would let him go. We let him do whatever he's going to do, because everything was in play, and he didn't want to wreck what had been going on for 6 months in a year. So that's what we would do. But for myself, when I worked in Peterborough, I pretty much stayed over there. I would come home sometimes at 2 in the morning and help my wife out, like when she was breastfeeding or something. I burp the kids, put them to sleep, grab 6-7 hours sleep, then go back out. But I knew I could grab a nap out there, so I would do that. Same with Midland, they put us all up. We didn't pay for anything.
Yeah, so could you go through a day of surveillance with your team? What would that be?
It's always breakfast to start with, Mark. Yeah, so usually it's the night before, everything's put in place. We get set what it is. We have to do everything we did, had to have what they call an action plan. So you had to plan for the worst and the best. So it said who was in charge, who was the road boss. You always had a road boss. You made all the calls. You had a takedown. So I was a member of the tactical team for 13 years, so I was allowed to carry certain stuff with me. And there was guys that had other skill sets, and that's what we did. Everyone had a job, and we wrecked a lot of vehicles. We did. When we took them off, we always tried to avoid a pursuit. And if what we were after outweighed what we were doing, we would just take them right out. Just wipe them right off the road, so that they couldn't get into a pursuit, take anyone else out, or hurt them. And so, but it was OPP money, wasn't mine. I did whatever they asked me to do. But and Bruce Davis was at that time was the chief, and he was right into that. He loved all that stuff. He'd have a helicopter if he could, but it wasn't in the budget. And he loved using our tactical team every chance he could. We would use them in our area every chance. But then, so we would have this form that filled out what car you were radio in. We ran on CSO radios, which were encrypted. So it was just us on those frequencies. And we usually had a 3-4 kilometer radius on those. And that's how it is. Someone would be on the eye, and everybody else would be fanned out. And we may not move all day. And we would switch that guy up all the time. But that's how it went. Some days we go and we'd end up in North Bay. And we stay in North Bay. But somebody during the night at all times would be on. And so that's a typical day. And we did a lot of arrests as we went. A lot of our work took us to Barrie City. Barrie City was a pretty big hub for everything, because it had all the motels. It had all the places. No one else had motels around, so a lot of stuff, that's where we ended up working out of there. And then we had to report someone.
But do you feel that the drug trade is behind so much criminal activity? Crime, there's so much crime now. I mean, when I was a kid growing up, it was innocence, you know. You could walk down the street at night and you didn't have to worry about anything but pick up the paper. There's stabbings, there's shootings. In certain areas in Toronto, and I'm sure in other areas. It's all over drugs.
You know what? Drugs and property. So,
Drugs and
property. So they both fuel each other. Bad guys want the best things. And not even bad guys, white collar crime. People that have money to import and export. It takes money to move product. So marijuana used to be the best seller. It was the best money maker for the buck. And it was the least amount of jail time. So you could make a shitload of money off selling marijuana. And if you got caught, consequences were very little. A little bit of coke could get you a year. A firearm now gets you an automatic year, plus if it's used in defense. I don't know if it's so much that crime itself has increased, but the use of weapons certainly has. Firearms, people disregard people's lives. It doesn't mean anything to them. And but on the other hand, one thing I think has got better, not taken away from that, is I see a lot less younger people drinking and driving. I think from what I can see, they respect that aspect of it and they use Uber and taxis and they get picked up and stuff like that. And I can only go from the group I've seen mostly in the last 5 or 6 years, especially with my kids. I haven't gone to university and all that, and seeing my friends' kids, they're all a little more careful that way because they realize one charge shuts all the doors for them in life.
I think part of it has to do with parents too. When we were young, we wouldn't call our parents at 2 o'clock in the morning. We had to go to work the next morning to pick us up. I told my kids, you call me anytime you need me.
And I'm the same way. Don't get me wrong, I'm still a little mad at it. But yeah, I won't lie, my kids come pick me up sometimes. So it's never going to even out. But that's the sad part, is that weapons are so available and anyone can get one. Anyone.
But that perception, my perception is that it's not necessarily all the local people that are involved in these things, that we have, for lack of a better word, we import our crime from all over the province, that it is a mobile, like the car theft situation is one where they're running gangs all over the province. It's not, to me, I look at it and think, 30 years ago you were dealing with, as you say, a dust up at the VI, or, somebody got drunk, or somebody, I mean, there was that sort of thing. Now, in what you read in the paper, it sounds like it's not the local people necessarily that are.
But you're right, it is all gang related.
Yeah.
And I don't take away from tow trucks, for example. They have their own things. Not all tow truck people are bad. I know just as many good ones. But the ones I dealt with, maybe a little prejudice on it, because I knew what they were doing. They were cutting Cadillac converters, and you get 30 in a day. Well, that's a lot of money right there. A Cadillac converter can fetch $400 or $500, and you get 20, 30 of them in a day. You did a good day's work. These gangs that are moving around with cars, they come up. We dealt a lot with the gypsies for a while there. And that's a terrible way to say it, but that's how they were referred to. They were coming up and they were doing all these other, in groups, major thefts. Go to the coach outlet, and they didn't care if you were security, they walked right by you. Grab 8 person each and walk out, you couldn't do anything about it. These people coming up, they know that. They know they can come up here, hit a rural area. There's a good chance, because in Toronto, it's a little more difficult, but a little more easier. My neighbors lost their truck at the airport. And who would have guessed, but there's nothing you can do about it. They came in, they got devices, and simple thing with your vehicles, keep your keys away from your front door.
Yeah.
Because they need to triangle electronic device to start your vehicle. They just go up beside your vehicle with a laptop. There's one in your car because you probably got a power start already. So now they're trying to find a second source to triangle it. And as soon as they got that, they lock it in. They technically made a key using the card and the computer to make the second key, and then they can drive with it. So it's so easy to do, and I'm just as guilty of having my car broken into twice over my career. Now, I went and bought myself the bar.
Yeah, the club.
For my truck, and it's not guaranteed, but what it is,
Slows them down.
it slows them down. I keep my lights on in my driveway. People don't realize. They think, well, I'll turn my lights off at night to save money. You could run 3 100 light bulbs, 100 watt, for a year, and it would cost you $15. And people don't realize, but they still, because it's the old mindset. we shut our power off, we shut our lights off when we leave the room. But when we talk to these guys, they will take the one with the lights off before they'll approach one with the lights on. Because cameras are better these days. Surveillance is better, but cameras don't do it. You send them into the police, and what happens a lot of times? We'll keep that on file. Let your insurance company know we got it. It's such a big thing. And I'm glad to see the government now really putting a lot of money into it. And they've taken a lot of people off in the last little while. But now that's more York, Durham, Toronto. It hasn't quite got this far yet. It's like everything else, they're moving further to steal cars, and they're taking them all back. And Boomerang and all these devices to track them are harder to do because they put them in canisters. And they just weigh them out. And unless you get lucky and track it to an area that is already under surveillance, it's tough to do. So yeah, I agree. Like it's just I don't like how long ago would it have been before you'd ever locked your door? You know, and now to leave your door unlocked, it's almost a little scary sometimes, right? So that's why it's important in this. Go ahead.
I was gonna ask you, so how often do you come across bad cops in Bradford? Is it like?
I know too.
Okay.
You can find them online. And but they're in every profession, and I mean, I personally have been tempted, but not tempted to do it. Like I said, when we took on the big operation, I'm staring at $4 million worth of unaccountable cash. In our job to transport it, no one even knows how much money's there. And we have to take it from Toronto to OBP headquarters just to have it counted. You know what I mean? Like, there's all that kind of stuff that happened on a regular basis.
Well, let's say you know somebody's a smart drug dealer. How many people plant drugs in that guy's car and arrest him? You know, I know this happened to somebody in Toronto.
No, and you know what? I have never worked with anybody like that, and I've worked with a lot of different guys. I've worked with 2 that have been taken off, that I've been working with, for what they did, and they ended up losing their job and a bunch of other stuff that came from it, but they did it. There's no two ways that what they were being accused of, they did. So, and yeah, they're in every profession. There's lazy cops.
For sure.
You know what I always say, I'll tell you, if you get a ticket, fight it. Like, anyone who doesn't fight a ticket, you're crazy. Because right off the bat, you got a 50%, just by sending that in, you got a 50% chance it's going to be squashed. And then you got another 25% that the face of it's written wrong. Because cops are lazy. They don't write well. They sometimes are in such a hurry. And then on top of that, when that happens, you still got another 10% that they can't get you a court date in time. And
Or the cop doesn't show up.
yeah, and they usually set all their dates on one day. I mean, and I'm not just telling you something most people don't know. So, but I'll tell you what. Any other questions? I don't want to keep you all night. I can do all day. This is perfect.
I have one more question.
Yep.
Not too long ago, I don't know how many years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I read in the Toronto Star that there was an actual major mafia dude in Bradford who got arrested. And I alerted the local newspaper, and they said, what? In Bradford? How often do the cops get surprised by things like that?
Well, we were already aware of the one you're talking about. We were dealing, you heard the expression, don't shit in your own backyard. Well, that's exactly what he was. He was just quiet, he had a nice place in Bradford. There's more than one. I mean, we took another one down, the kid found a handgun at the bus stop. Yeah, the neighbors saw the guys coming to whack him. And the police showed up and got them, but took another day to find one of the handguns that threw in the snow.
Lived on the 6th.
Nope, no, not with that one. They work every day. But yeah, there's all kinds. You'd be surprised, like, I was surprised that there's probably 400 police officers when I started that lived in Bradford. You didn't know who was a police officer. Well, the same with nowadays, who is involved in criminal activity, right? You don't know if it's your neighbor or whatever. Like when we were doing all these auto thefts, it was nothing to see one in a guy's garage. And you ask them, but I don't know, they didn't care, we just took them. So yeah, they're everywhere. And Innisfil is right now got lots.
How often are you guys surprised to find this in your neighborhood? I mean,
Where we usually get surprised when another agency shows up with a big TAC team, a full unit, and they're blocking off, and then we usually get the courtesy call.
that happens.
Yeah, well, we were known for doing it too, so can't really be too mad at them. But who cares? They got them, right? And sometimes it's true. Cops are bad for talking. So why would you tell something you don't have to give up just yet? Because someone will say something at some point to their wife, to their friend. So, all right. Go ahead, Mark.
All right, well, tell us about one of your more memorable cases you've had over your course of your career.
It's a tough one.
Is there one where you solved a crime? You found the piece of evidence
That
that...
hurts, Mark. Well, it wasn't a big one. The Sandy Cove Acres, the retirement home up there, they were getting pummeled. Every night in the winter, all the cars were getting hit, all their sheds. And they were big believers, don't put their lights on at night. 9 o'clock, their lights went on. And so I won't lie, I was looking for a place to have a nap. And I had parked in, I had an unmarked Tahoe, and it was perfect. I backed into a driveway, and just like in that area, they all backed in. So I fit right in. And I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna take it easy here, and I remember putting my head back, and there was light snow, so if I see someone, I'll know. Well, I guess I dozed off a little longer, and I thought, I remember waking up, and I'm like, oh, God, I've been sleeping for an hour. I look out, and there are 4 sets of footprints past in front of my car, and I'm like, and then I look down and I can see 2 lights on interiors of the other cars. I'm like, shit! I was sleeping, they came right by me! What's the odds, eh? So I got out and started following them. And I called some of the other guys, and they're like, Hines, it's 5 o'clock in the morning, let it go, let somebody else know. Guys, these guys have been cleaning everybody out for 2 weeks. So I'm down there, and the K9 guys came up. I said, I don't need the dog for this one, I'm just going to follow the tracks. So we followed them, went right to a house. We could see them in there partying, there was like 6 or 7. And we went and got a warrant. We came back, I got to tell you, they had everything that had been stolen in the last 2 weeks, from outdoor boat motors, off of boats parked in driveways, to fishing rods, to you name it, they had everything. This place was just packed. They hadn't sold anything or taken it to pawn shops yet. So, and they took every bit of change, every lighter, every ID. So it was a warm feeling to get.
They were living in Sandy Cove.
They were up visiting for weekends. So they're at a friend's place, and the mom was always gone out or wherever, right? So he had all his buddies there. But you know, it seemed like a really good thing at the time we got him, and you got a lot of pats on the back, and so many people in Sandy Cove were so happy. But then I had about 3 weeks of paperwork for that. Every person back. Did their stuff. Took about 4 or 5 of us. But it was kind of a neat feeling because I worked in Sandy Cove as a handyman a little bit there, just when they were stuck and stuff. So it was kind of neat to be the guy to catch these guys. And I almost didn't get them. I'm thankful they didn't check my door. That would have been even worse. Anyways, is there anything else I can enlighten you on, or questions? Anything else?
The shotgun being stolen out of the police car, what do you know about that?
Which one?
Oh, is it
Up in
Angus?
Innisfil there.
Recently?
Yeah, recently there was one thing in Angus where,
It was Angus, I think they
Angus,
lost
right.
one. Yeah, it was Angus that lost one
Oh,
over there, yeah. There's been officers that left their guns on the toilet, the back of the toilet and stuff. In court too, in courthouse. I don't think we've actually ever lost a firearm that I know of in South Simcoe. Come audit time, we've had to find a few. But not
I
that
know I did a ride along with the OPP
Yep.
years back, and looking at that gun, it's locked up solid.
Well, it is, but remember what unlocks it.
Yes,
You know, we had them too, and if you manipulated enough or shook it around enough, it was going to come out.
yeah.
So it was, but the newer ones aren't like that. They're locked in the trunk, and they all have the special thing in their trunk lids and different things. That, they call it 3-level security. So when I was undercover and traveling or working drug units, I had 2 different firearms in my vehicle, sometimes 3. But we had special lock boxes that were in the vehicles, and they were bolted in.
Okay, so did you ever fire your gun not on the range?
Nope, I was very fortunate. that probably had to draw down seriously on several people. And working in the drug unit, that was quite a common thing. And we knew, the nice thing about us is we knew our targets. It's not like a road officer when you stop somebody, they're dealing with the first time. We always knew the targets we were after, and we had a pretty good idea what we were doing. But I've been with a couple guys that, while involved in taking the vehicles down, have had to shoot the firearms. So, and in Bradford, I guess we've had 3-4 officers have to shoot parties, not because they wanted to, they just left them at a point where they had no choice. So that's an unfortunate part of the business, and it happens. So, in our service, you look at it, when we talk about Toronto guys coming up for an easier life, we had a worse death ratio per capita in Toronto at the time. Looking for injuries and stuff like that, but it's just because we have such a small population, right, compared to people and compared to Toronto. So, that's what I got for you. It's nothing great, it's just how policing has changed and technology has taken over. And some of it's for good, some of it's for bad. But I think if we can get more people interested.
Is there any police dramas on TV that you will watch?
That I watch? Well, I do like watching some of the shows, like the East Coast ones, the detective investigating shows. You got the detective 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and try to figure out before they get to the last 2 episodes. That would be very successful yet. But I like to watch that kind of stuff. Yeah. I don't watch Blue Line.
Blue Blood.
Blue Blood. Yes, I don't watch that too much or anyway. But I'm always interested in movies and documentaries and stuff like that, and I read. So I'll read books, but I try to read stuff that is at least true based, like the RCMP officers that were all killed before there. Moncton, I think it was.
Yeah.
I'll read stuff like that. But as for movie stories wise, I don't know. The kids have questions for me every night for a long time.
I have a friend who's retired police. His favorite show is Barney Miller.
Barney Miller, old school.
He said that was the most realistic police show.
Yeah, well, except for the paperwork. When I started, honestly, you could write a search warrant in 2 pages. And the first page was all about you, and the second page is what you were going after. And we would go to the JP's house, which was JP Tupman back then. We could go to his house. We never went during the game. We waited in between periods or innings, because he wouldn't talk to us if there was a sport game. And a couple times he would even come to the station and man prisoners in his house coat. So it was actually pretty funny to have him. We could write a warrant in 2 pages. But that was typewriters. And when I left, I think the average warrant was 27 to 50 pages long, depending on what you were going for. So, well, I want to thank you for allowing me to take your time up tonight and just brush on a few things and let you know